Hello everyone, I'm Charlie Tolhurst. Welcome to the Charlie Tolhurst Show for today, the 22nd of July. We're now officially school's out, as Alice Cooper once said on a record. We're now into the summer holidays. Doesn't stop there though for politics and many other things because we've got a Tory leadership race hotting up by the minute. I'm joined by Labour Party supporter Zach Chambers, trying up all the latest news from the week. Hello, Zach.
Hi, Charlie. Hello, mate.
So, how many candidates? From 11 became 10, and now from 3 become 2. Very soon, from 2 will become 1, as the famous saying there implies. That the Tory leadership contest has now gone down to the final 2 candidates, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, getting through during a vote earlier this week by the 1922 committee, Graham Brady, or Sir Graham Brady, better known as. And yes, this week will be a huge week for politics with all the eliminations, Penny Mordaunt being eliminated, and Kemi Badenoch also getting eliminated earlier in the week. But now it means for the final 2 candidates, they will tour the country and take part in 2 television debates, with a BBC debate on Monday, which will be very, very interesting indeed. There was actually a debate last Sunday, which means Zach are going to round up right now for you guys. But Zach, what did you make of the remaining candidates being eliminated and how they performed in the debate last weekend on ITV?
Oh, there are only 2 left, Charlie. Would you believe it or not? Yes. My opinion, the ITV debate was even more feisty than the one on Channel 4, Charlie, most certainly. There was a lot of backwards and forwards. It was a more tighter format, I would say, in terms of questioning and answering and the interaction with moderator. It was a very tight format. Within an hour, even candidates got to put questions to each other. It was a very heat-on debate, Charlie, no doubt about it. You had Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss certainly at it at each other, Charlie, on tax, on various things, on the ability to do the job in the cabinet. Then you have Penny Mordaunt and Kemi Badenoch clashing on whether they support Penny supported self-identification or not. It's some of the most typical lines on Friday, but it's even more feisty. And you have to say they're certainly getting their fists out, Charlie, no doubt about it. It was very feisty. At the end of the day, Charlie, it resulted quite interestingly in the fact they fight so much that the main 2 candidates, Sunak and Truss, didn't want to take place in the Sky debate on Tuesday, so they had to cancel it. That's been rescheduled now for August. So that was a very bad look for the Conservative Party, no doubt about it, Charlie. But yes, they've eliminated a few others now. Kemi Badenoch was gone on the who went actually? I think it was Tom Tugendhat on the Monday, Kemi Badenoch on the Tuesday, and on Wednesday, out went Penny Mordaunt. She was the early favourite when this competition was getting going, Charlie. But a series of flat performances and rather underwhelming, pitches on the debate stages. And I think, that's where all the coalition around Liz Truss came into effect. And she was knocked out by a very slim amount of votes. By it's very tight, Charlie, you have to say. It was, she just got knocked out by Liz Truss. And there we as we know, Charlie, we're left with 2 candidates left. We have the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, aka Criminal Chancellor, if you want to be kind, because if the Tory party members do elect Rishi Sunak, they'll be electing him back-to-back criminals, if you think about it. He also got a fixed penalty notice. And then there's what I can say, sassy Liz Truss, who's probably most famous, Charlie, I would say, is the Foreign Secretary, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, most famous for going about how 3/4 of our pork came from Chinese markets. I've been over that little speech she did when she was serving under David Cameron as Environment Secretary. It's still over the internet, that cheesy little speech. But she made the final 2. They got very different visions, I have to say, as well. Rishi Sunak is one candidate that is advocating for tax cuts, but later on whereas Liz Truss is advocating for tax cuts, but now, basically, she wrote in the Mail on Saturday, I believe. Oh no, sorry, no, it was the Mail yesterday. Today it was yesterday's Mail, Charlie. She wrote that she would introduce an emergency budget if she got into power and put tax cuts in its place. That's a very viable commitment by her. Sunak has obviously pledged to use the Brexit freedoms needed to be. As well, and as well as a lot of various other things, as well, tax cuts, but not now. There is talk about, I think Sunak was saying inflation regarding that. I mean, the economics are saying that potentially inflation may not come down until the middle of next year. So if we're going to get tax cuts, Charlie, it's possible with the Sunak government, we may not get it until the middle of next year, potentially. That would be quite a long way away. And speaking of inflation, Charlie, it's now 9.4%. It was up from 9.1 a couple of months ago. And that is still concerning that the inflation rate is still going up. Whilst growth was 0.5%, and that's good to see that growth is improving, inflation has also gone up as well, Charlie, by 9 to 9.4%. There is a possibility that it will still peak at 11%. And also, don't forget, Charlie, potentially the Bank of England expected once again to raise interest rates at its next meeting, potentially as high as 0.5% potentially at the next meeting, Charlie, as well. So there's a lot of interesting economics that are going on here, Charlie. But we now know it's Liz Truss. It's now Rishi Sunak. From a Labour perspective, Charlie, I think Labour Party HQ would have been popping the champagne with these two candidates, Charlie. I suspect if it's Liz Truss, I think they'll be popping the champagne even more. I think her unelectability is quite something, I have to say, Charlie. I don't think she would be electable.
I think both of them are just really weak candidates. I have to say, Truss used to be a Liberal Democrat, according to Rishi Sunak.
Yeah, she used to speak at a Liberal Democrat conference back in, I think it was the early 2000s, Charlie, or the 90s. She even advocated for abolishing the monarch when in her Liberal Democrat days. Obviously, her views have completely transformed then, so we shouldn't name and shame her totally, but she's been used as a bit of a stick on this. And I wonder whether it's going to be brought up in the BBC debate on Monday, Charlie, because it'll be hosted in Stoke-on-Trent, I believe. That's the correct location, in front of an audience of voters. And then on Tuesday, Charlie, after the BBC debate, there's going to be a debate hosted by The Sun on Talk TV at 6 o'clock. Harry Cole and Kate McCann are going to be co-hosting that. I don't know if you didn't know this, but yes, there's going to be two debates within 2 days. 6 o'clock is obviously, given that it's going to be a debate hosted by The Sun, it's going to be aiming towards a Sun audience. So expect a lot about tax cuts, a lot of patriotism, a lot of things that are going to be interesting to the readers of The Sun. Rather than your traditional public viewing or anything like that. But yeah, there's going to be a few debates, Charlie, that's probably get the attentions, and that will be in 4 days time. So we're going to get back-to-back debates on the Monday, on the Tuesday, and then next week hits hustings as well, Charlie. The start of the hustings, the 12 hustings that are going to start next week as well, ending all the way until we get the Conservative Party leadership vote on the 5th of September, when the new Prime Minister will then be sworn in office on the 6th of December, Charlie. Sorry, 6th of September. My apologies. I was going to say 6th of December. That's a while away. But 6th of September, that's when the new Prime Minister will be sworn in with the new leader elected 5th of September.
And the election will be, I think, on
Charlie and hustings.
Yeah, so I think it's around the 5th or the 6th the Prime Minister gets elected. But yes, but this is what Rishi Sunak had to say on Rwanda's migrant plan. More on migrant crisis in a minute. This is what Sunak had to say on LBC the other day on Andrew Marr's show, saying the Tories must make Rwanda policy work. Have a listen to this.
What needs to be changed on our immigration policy?
Well, first of all, we need to make sure that we make our Rwanda policy work. Now, I voted for Brexit for many reasons, but in part because it gave us the ability to control our borders. And I say that as someone who's proud.
I was going to say,
a family of immigrants.
A lot of people say a family of immigrants. You're the last person that should be driving people off to flying them off to Rwanda, particularly when they're vulnerable.
It's actually the opposite. This country did something amazing for my family, and it welcomed them as immigrants. But it planning and sort of sitting here today with you is because
Not welcoming people now.
because of the opportunities that this country gave my family, and I want to repay that, and I want to make sure that opportunity is available for others. But we do need to have control of our borders. When my grandparents came here, they came here because the British government had decided that it wanted them to come here, and it is absolutely right that we continue as a country to decide who we want to come here.
Thank you there to Rishi Sunak, who spoke there about the situation with the border. I'm now going to get for you guys a video up of Liz Truss, who was actually at a meeting the other day with some school kids saying, this is so awkward, Truss getting honest feedback about her being Prime Minister. Have a listen to this.
Someone's like, stop flashing a light.
Don't worry, we'll ask them to go away in a minute. This is very frightening members of the lobby over here. So these people follow me around. So
That's very annoying.
you said it. You said it.
Stop taking the fire. You on fire then.
Really? Okay.
If I was you, I'd tell them to be on.
The problem with being a politician is you can't fire the press.
Where's Boris Johnson?
Boris is back at number 10 Downing Street.
Why are they going to kick him out? This is going to fix him. Do me a favour. When you become Prime Minister, evict him.
Well, he will have to move out at that point. That is true. That is true.
I still think Larry should be the Prime Minister.
Well, Boris Johnson, had this good.
Yeah, I think Larry is the Prime Minister. I think that's quite great. Is there any more than cats being Prime Minister? This is so awkward.
Harry, would you like to show us what you're doing here at Little Miracles? Maybe we can take a walk round. Shall we do that? Let's do that. Let's go.
What's it like for this?
Thank you there. That video was a little clip there of Liz Truss being, well, should I say, hammered by her children, or whether she would be Prime Minister. I mean, these kids obviously have very forthright views when it comes to Liz being a Prime Minister here. It sounded like she went back to school. Zach, what did you make to the candidates' reception on media?
Charlie, when you lose the kids, that was extremely awkward. I mean, I don't know. These kids must be watching a lot of television, Charlie. They must watch the news quite a lot. Because imagine having, where's Boris? Says one of them. I mean, imagine having to watch that, Charlie, and be contended for Prime Minister and say, where's Boris? We don't like him. I have to say, when the kids don't like him, and has even probably more intelligent vision than some of these politicians, Charlie, you know you've done bad. When the kids don't like you, you've got a problem. And it's not just, if Boris was here, I can't imagine Boris being there, to be fair, Charlie. He would have got slaughtered by the kids. He would have actually got slaughtered by the kids. I would love to see the kids, right? Okay. If Boris Johnson was actually there, forget Liz Truss totally. Let's put in blooming Boris Johnson and see if the kids enjoy him there. That would be an even more awkward scene, Charlie. That would have been a really more awkward scene.
Yeah, and there'll be more on my show later on about something called Youth Parliament on Charlie's Good News this week, where me and Zach will dive in more what that covers as well. So keep updated with that. Now, moving on to Just Stop Oil now, aka climate terrorists and climate anarchists. God, if you thought Insulate Britain were bad enough, these guys are even crazier. Now, the other day, they declared the M25, I quote this, a civil resistance, to go out and jump on gantries and pull up signs literally in Surrey, around junction 10 of the motorway. And now they're proposing that the government reduce and probably suspend the use of new oil in this country by a certain year. They are obviously not fond of the government's plan to go net zero by 2050. Zach, they're certainly not propagating this the right way, aren't
Well,
they?
interesting is that they obviously don't like the net zero by 2050. They probably want it earlier if you think about it, Charlie. Just stop oil. Were they the same lot that tried to get onto the track? I can't remember if it was them or Extinction Rebellion.
It was
I
them.
don't know, I was going to say, well, it was the same group that tried to get on the Silverstone circuit during the middle of F1 race. It's an interesting location they've done it at, Charlie. I have to say, one thing I have to say that would have worked to their benefits, and I don't approve of their actions at all. I have to say, going around the motorway blocking things, that's just not the way to do it. But one of the things I thought was interesting was they did it around the Surrey area, Charlie, and they've done it very close to where those wildfires was taking place, Charlie, near Dagenham and the other areas as well, that all those very horrible wildfires were taking place. And I was thinking, if Just Stop Oil just had a walk around the road there, and they might have had some effect without actually stopping and probably gone in the burnt grass or anything, like walk around burnt grass and lands and everything, and did a protest on there. They probably would have a little bit of an effect. But on the motorway, Charlie, I'm afraid, come on, you can't do it in the middle of the motorway when people are going around doing their daily business and disrupting people's lives isn't the right thing. I mean, we've had this warning this week since the wildfires, Charlie. These wildfires this week have been a clear warning about potential climate change and global warming because of the extreme conditions we've had. But Just Stop Oil do not help their cause, don't think, Charlie. We're going on the motorway.
And just look at their Twitter page as well, advertising, join us tomorrow as we demand the government to take the action necessary to protect the people of this country from hashtag cost of living crisis and climate crisis. Oh my God. And then here we go. Look, these are the climate protesters gluing themselves to printing presses and everything. Wow.
I had somebody on as well, by the looks of it as well, but yeah. Yeah, I have to say, Charlie, look, if you view it from that message alone, then they have a fairly reasonable point. Their messaging is good, but the actions that they do, the way they do it, is not good. Not good enough. I have to say, the messaging is good, but the way they do it, Charlie, I just think is very poor.
Yeah, and Zach, I watched a little interview the other day on Piers Morgan Uncensored with a woman who unfortunately missed her slot at a funeral. Someone, very close family member of hers, died, and the coffin carrying the dead in the hearse just got there late because of the protesters. The M25 shut two lanes off
That's
the other day because of it. I mean, Piers gave him a big grilling and said, You're doing this and you're causing mayhem. People are not supporting your cause because of what you're doing. And it kind of reminds me a lot of what we saw last September with the Insulate Britain protest, where Liam Norton goes on media outlets to try and defend the actions that the government need to take to reduce the climate crisis. But Zach, this hasn't got nothing to do with climate crisis, these protesters sitting in the middle of the road. They're causing disruption to everyday human beings.
Yeah, the actions and the way they do it are just cause further problems. It actually, I would say, it pollutes the motorways even more because you have a car of traffic just stuck there, and with some of them with their engines on, just polluting a whole certain area whilst they're stuck in the road. Look, like I said, Charlie, I think the messaging that they do is good. They're talking about, potentially reducing oil by a certain period. I agree with them on that. But the way they do things is intolerable. It's not going to win over. I would say, Charlie, why don't they use the example of Greta Thunberg's protest? They don't disrupt the roads and they go around the streets. They go on public pathways, Charlie, where they're allowed to protest there peacefully and very effectively without any disruption to the motorways. And I wish they would just take a stick out of them rather than put themselves in danger and put others in danger as well. It's a shame, really.
I know, Zach. It's they're just. I put on the Twitter the other day. These are a bunch of idiots who don't know what they're talking about. What they're talking about regarding to standing in the middle of a road or blocking, as you said the other week, blocking the British Grand Prix. Which when I saw that happen, Jesus. I mean, they would have had to have. Thank goodness to the marshals for clearing these loonies out of the circuit, because I'm sorry, but the whole point is you protest peacefully. You protest also legally, and that is an example of illegal protests being done. I mean, last year the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill passed through Parliament, giving police powers to basically like jail people who do these illegal protests. We saw that in Instate Britain last year. We need to see police properly going out there and arresting these protesters and locking them up behind bars, because I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to all the listeners watching on YouTube. I don't want to have the public being told, okay, we've got to disrupt our lives because idiots block the road. It's crazy. So, and Zach, before I move on to the next segment on the next news story, do you think the new police crime and sentencing bill going through Parliament will make these protests more easier to police?
Well, it could potentially. I agree with the policing powers. I agree with them. I think what ruined, the bill for me, Charlie, and the way it was passed was they put some silly little things in there, such as the protest things. Some of the protest things are pretty bad, to be fair, like breaking up protests based on noise. I agree with the principle of not disrupting motorways and crucial carriageways, Charlie, because they're the most dangerous and they're the ones that put the public at risk. But the reason why I supported that bit of the bill, I don't support some of the protest measures. I don't like the idea of going on the motorway, as I said, but I don't like the idea that then you would ruin peaceful protests based on the amount of noise they're making. I think that's a terrible idea, Charlie. And we've seen the likes of Steve Bray, for example, who, you can agree, disagree. He's annoying sometimes, but he's peacefully protesting. And he's having his megaphones being taken away because it's too loud, apparently. It's not a good idea to get rid of protests based on noise. I mean, if there was a group of people shouting, you obviously going to be.
Was that the anti-Brexit protester in London?
He is the anti-Brexit protest in London, and you can agree, disagree. I mean, sometimes it's not really worth his while. I agree with most of what he says, but it's not going to be that effective now, I don't think, in this day and age of politics. But he has a right to protest, and I just think some of his rights have been taken away unfairly in some instances, Charlie.
It's very interesting, guys. Please comment down below what you make of Just Stop All, and again, just comment down below what you make of them. And I haven't really got much else to say other than please stop blocking roads. And the tweet I saw earlier as well, please ignore it, because I don't want any more people getting arrested for committing more dangerous crimes. But moving on now to Russia and Ukraine's war, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, so-called special military operation if you're a Russian citizen, which it isn't. But this week, Vladimir Putin went outside on an international trip to, I think it was Tehran or somewhere, for a meeting with Turkey's president and also Iran's supreme leader as well, talking about trying to bolster support for his special military operation in Ukraine. Now, I'm using that phrase because that's what the Russian president refers it to. So he tries to go there and try and secure, obviously, the exports on grain being reduced and stuff. More on that in a minute. But Zach, do you think this visit that Putin has made clearly symbolizes that the Russian president is very isolated from the whole world?
Yeah, he's meeting with Iran, and if you think about it, Charlie, if you're meeting with Iran, then there's no better friend to Iran than bloody Russia, to be fair. If you got Iran getting deals to do for Russia, then it probably tells you much about the fact that, you know, you've not got much allies, and the fact that it turned to Iran to aid the Russians, yeah, that's not very good, isn't it? It just tells you much about that they're not getting much, they can't get much aid, they're having to go to other countries to help them get the aid, and it looks bad. I mean, Turkey is, you know, Turkey was there as well, and I think Turkey's this sort of compromised country that seems to be flash out in both directions. You don't know what their intention is sometimes. And, you know, sometimes, you know, think about it, they'll support Russia, sometimes they'll support the other countries. And, you know, at one point, Turkey was holding up Sweden and Finland's bid to join NATO. But it obviously he's now dropped, President Erdogan has dropped that threat now, thankfully. But for the Turkish president, it's a bit of a difficult balancing act of having to work with Russia, also work with his allies. It's a difficult one on that. One thing of good news, Charlie, that came out today is that there has been a grain export agreement, Charlie. What this is happening via the Black Sea. So they get grain that gets commuted from the Black Sea to other countries, and obviously the Black Sea exports. Yeah, so obviously the Black Sea is used to obviously get these grains over to other countries, Charlie. As well, there has been an agreement between multiple countries to restart grain exports, Charlie, and because otherwise, without this agreement, there would have been a big food crisis because obviously lots of food use grain, and they're going to agree millions of tons of grain from the Black Sea ports, and this could prevent a food crisis, Charlie, which is very good news. So some good news out of that today. There's not much going on in Ukraine at the moment, to be fair, Charlie. It appears that the Ukrainians are probably going to eye up regaining Kherson, hopefully, but we don't know what about the rest. I mean, the Russians have sort of calmed down with their attack. Maybe they just run out of military gear to you know, be able to attack other countries, Charlie. But yeah, I think it's calmed down for now. But I've watched the next.
I'm very surprised what the Belarusian president had to say, saying the war must be stopped in order to avoid the abyss of a nuclear war.
Yeah, that's interesting. He's advocating for a peace deal. He is. Now, obviously, maybe the Belarusian president is seeing where this is going and thinking this war's not a good idea to be continued further. The fact that he's urging the war to be stopped from Russia and Ukraine might tell you where he thinks this is going, because it sounds like if it doesn't, he thinks nukes are going to get involved. I don't know, Charlie. I think I struggle to see what the president of Lukashenko would really say. Really, I mean, I doubt it. Really, to be fair, where we're going to get into nukes as soon as people stress. I think people hype it up, but I can't see nukes being used in this war at all at the moment, Charlie.
Yeah, and some other news as well. Google, which is obviously a search engine that we all use around the world, is to be banned in the occupied Donetsk region of Ukraine for allegedly, and I quote this now, promoting, in quotes here, terrorism and violence against all Russians, says Denis Pulashilin. We have decided to block Google on territory of the DPR. This is what the site means with criminals. They are isolated from people. If Google stops pursuing its criminal policy and returns to the mainstream of law, morality, and common sense, there will be no obstacles for its work. Okay.
Weird.
Russia clearly hate Google.
Yeah, they do. Clearly, it's a bit like China. China, they hate Google. They don't allow Google on their servers. I don't believe they have to use their own search engine because it's very communist in any imagination, very fascist and very spy-like in what they do. So yeah, it's not surprising they banned Google. It's very the repeat of the China policy of use their own search engine. Everyone else is user-friendly search engine. The rest are rubbish.
Zach, I've got a question for you. Do you think China and Taiwan conflict could grow ever closer? There's been a bit of developments this week about Taiwan wanting to be independent.
Well, I think China are looking at this and probably don't want to set an example of based on how the war is going in Russia, Ukraine. I think they want to do it in a way that's actually effective and not the way that the Russians are trying to do it in the Ukraine. So I think it's still on their radar, but I don't think that they're sort of holding off at the moment, because if you go too soon, Charlie, as we know with the Russians, then you're going to get galloped behind. If you underestimate the defense, it's not going to work.
Yeah, please comment down below, guys. What do you make of the China and Taiwan situation at the moment? Do you think it will escalate? Let me know in the comments. But moving on now to the sports briefing. This is where we react to all the latest sports news. I'm going to start with the NASCAR Cup Series now. Quickly, just before we went on air, checked out the last weekend's race in New Hampshire, and Christopher Belzak secures his place in the playoffs with his first win of the season.
He certainly does, Charlie. Now we're left with 2 slots, I believe, left in the chase potentially now, because Christopher Bell winning that race ahead of Chase Elliott. Now, Chase Elliott, I should say, got more points because I believe he won a few more stages than Christopher Bell. But yeah, I mean, Kevin Harvick, who finished 5th, actually got the same amount of points as Christopher Bell in 1st. But that's what winning stages does to you, to be fair, Charlie. You've got to win stages to get more points. So Chase Elliott actually got more points than Christopher Bell, even though he finished in 2nd place. So I think Chase Elliott will be pretty pleased with that. Truex actually got the most points out of this. He got 53, Charlie, as well. So it just proves how much the order has changed during the race as well. But yeah, I mean, there's now 2 more slots in the for the playoffs left, Charlie. There's only can be 2 more winners before the rest of it goes based on where you finish and how you get on points. So hang on, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6. Have we got 6? Around about 6? I think it's about 6 races left, Charlie, before the playoffs. And it's possible, mate, who knows, Charlie, that we could have 6 different winners in 6 different races that are not in the playoffs. And then it would come down to who is the top 16 based on points.
Yeah.
As well. And, so there's 2 more slots available for those who don't win races on the highest points. But if you get 2 more new drivers winning, Charlie, then that's all the slots filled, and then it all comes down to points as well. So, yeah, that was a good drive by Christopher Bell to win at the end in there, Charlie, as well. Let me go through the rest of the tops, the rest from 6th to 10th, because I've done. I'll do top 5. So, Bell, Elliott, Bubba Wallace, Truex, Harvick, and then 6th to 10th was Hamlin, Keselowski, Ross Chastain, Daniel Suarez, and Kurt Busch as well in 10th position as well. We've got the Cup Series race as well. Thank you very much. We got the Cup Series race this weekend. I've been given my Percy Pigs as well. That's on Sunday, Charlie.
That's at Pinot. That's the second race at Pinocchio, and also as well.
Pinocchio.
Yeah, huge news for the Cup Series. I found this out the other day. This is the first ever time in the history of the Cup Series, I believe, we are racing on the streets of Chicago in Illinois, which will be very, very interesting indeed.
Yeah, that's a good announcement, Charlie. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that's like on the track. That is going to replace Road America, Charlie. That's going to lose its 4th of July date next year. Road America. So NASCAR will not be racing at Road America in the Cup Series next year. Bit of a shame because I do like that track, but clearly they've decided to go to a new circuit in Chicago, streets of Chicago, which is fair enough, Charlie. I mean, I saw a bit of it on the simulation where they did a sort of video game preview of the track. It looks, in part, quite wide, I have to say, Charlie. I expect the racing is going to be very good with such a wide circuit as well. But it's not often, Charlie, that you go and race on a street circuit. And this is the first time that NASCAR sort of going into the street circuit element of their racing, Charlie. So, yeah, I'm going to be very interested in looking forward to see how this race is going to be like next year in Chicago, Charlie.
Yeah, The date for this, July the 2nd, and it was 2.2 miles through downtown Chicago, Lakeshore Drive, Michigan Avenue. The course will pass through Grant Park and approaches Soldier Field, home of the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
As well. I think that's I'm not sure if that's an NFL team or an NBA team. We'll have to double check what they are. But a sports team, nevertheless, that will be Chicago, where they will be held. So that is next July, about a year's time, the new race will be on the calendar. Moving on to street racing now. Formula E took place last weekend in New York City in America. So staying in the Americas now, the trip to New York City. I have to say, watching the highlights last week, entertaining racing. Wow. Race 1, Nick Cassidy won, despite crashing out late on as the race was red flagged. In the second race, though, pretty much mayhem all the way through, and Antonio Felix da Costa's taking the win.
Absolutely, Charlie. 2 races, twice the drama. I'm going to start on race 1, Charlie, because that was a bizarre finish. They didn't get all the race in because it was dry at first, Charlie. It was really dry, but you could see all the dark clouds in the distance. It was coming very quickly towards the circuit. And wow, it really transformed the racing. Once the rain calmed down, Charlie, it resulted in absolute chaos. I think it was the top 3 at the time, Charlie, that crashed into turn 1. Or somewhere. It might not have been turn 1, but it was somewhere, Charlie. They just crashed out. And then there were several others coming towards them. I mean, Nick Cassidy was leading the race. He crashed. And then I think the other 2 that were behind them just followed really fast because they had no grip, Charlie, on the circuit. I mean, whilst Formula E cars do have all-weather tyres, Charlie, I don't think they expect to take the wet, dry element of it, Charlie, so quickly, because it was raining in one part of the circuit and it was dry the other, and it was chaos. It was honestly insane. I mean, I must admit, Charlie, Nick Cassidy is very lucky to win, given the fact they decided not to restart the race and revert back to the results of the race before the crash. I think that's understandable, but he's lucky to win. And then in race 2, Charlie, it was Antonio Felix da Costa that managed to get the victory. Just hold off Stoffel Van Dorn in second place, Charlie, as well. Good job by Felix da Costa just to hold off Stoffel Van Dorn as well. So it was a very important race for him as well. Mitch Evans was 3rd, Alexander Sim was 4th. Sam Bird, very impressive drive, Charlie, from 16th to 5th position. Very impressive. Same for Robin French, from 10th place to 6th. Nick De Vries started where he's finished.
I saw a clip of Nick De Vries losing control of his car a couple of times, once trying to get past Mitch Evans.
Oh, yeah, Charlie, that was very interesting to watch. Because there was a bump, you might have seen offline, there was a certain very bumpy element of the circuit. Whereas you go off the racing line, Charlie, there is a big bump in the middle of the circuit. And once you hit that bump, your car runs totally out of control. And Nick De Vries was a master of how to save a car and avoid hitting the barriers. Because if there was any other driver, Charlie, I imagine they would have hit that barrier. And would have been out of the race. But yeah, there were some hairy moments, you have to say, with Nick De Vries. Did manage to get to his original position because he was 9th at one point. Did manage to get to 7th. Jake James was 8th. Andrea Lotta was a poor race for him in 9th. Eduardo Montara, the fastest lap overall, Charlie, in 10th position. So he got an extra point as well. And I have to say, Charlie, what this means, there's now 4 races to go. So there's going to be double headers until the rest of the season. There's now 2 in London next week, I should point out. 2 in London next week. And then I think 2 weeks after, Charlie, they're going to South Korea for the season finale. There'll be 2 races there. 2 races in London. And I should point, this is the driver standing. I'm going to read it out now. So Stoffel Van Dorn's 11 points ahead of Eduardo Mortara. And then Mitch Evans in 3rd with 139. So there is about a 16-point difference between Mitch Evans, and Stoffel Van Dorn. So I think they're going to be the top 3 to watch out for, Charlie. As well, it's all to play for, I think, between third position and first.
I think
Stoffel
John
Van
Eric
Dorn-
Byrne, though, could be in the mix as well, potentially, because if you look at where he is, he's only about 27 off.
Yeah, but it's been a poor weekend as well for John Eric Byrne. He scored none in the 2 races, Charlie. And he got 0 in the first race 1, 0 in race 2. He needs to score points to stay in the championship, Charlie. He's got 4 races to pick up significant points and tighten the gap. So does Eduardo Mortara. He needs a good result as well because Stoffel Van Dorn and the Mercedes is ahead at the moment by 11 points.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go. And obviously, it's London the next races. And when you look at the results there, I mean, it shows you that Van Dorn has got consistency scoring points. So could be interesting. So next time out, London is the next race for the Formula E cars. Now it's time to move on now to talk about Formula One. Nick de Vries actually stays with us because he tested for Mercedes today in FP1. Zach, what do you make to the running so far at Paul Ricard?
Ferrari are the favourites so far, I think, Charlie. I think Red Bull are sandbagging a little bit, but I think Ferrari seems to be the favourites based on today's running. I think they've had a good car overall. I have to say Red Bull are behind, I think, a little bit as well. I'm very interested to see what Mercedes do. I'm very interested to see what they do. Are they sandbagging? How much are they off the pace by? We'll see FP3 in qualifying tomorrow. But I think there's a lot more potential in them as well. And obviously, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot to reveal about tomorrow, Charlie. I personally think at the moment, I think it's going to be a Ferrari pole, potentially. I think Red Bull will be behind in second. I think Mercedes will be a close third, I think, in my opinion.
Not if your name is Carlos Sainz, because you have a 10-place grid penalty for an engine change.
Absolutely not. I forgot to mention that as well. 10 places for Carlos Sainz. That engine that blew up in Austria was the killer blow that caused him to take a 4th engine and a 10-place grid penalty there for Charlie. So he will, at the most, be able to start in 11th position. He may decide that it would be best to not go through into Q3 potentially, although I don't know how that will work. Interestingly, whether that would be worth the effort. He may decide that Q2 is enough, but I suppose he may want to try for Q3 so that he could potentially get the pole. If Ferrari this fast, potentially get the pole, and then start the best P11. And he can work his way through the field chart. It's not difficult to overtake on this circuit, I would say. There's plenty of overtaking zones, I think, that it can be done, and I think it's possible. So, yeah, I'd watch out for that, Charlie. If Sainz can get through to Q3 and then work his way through the field, I think it's a good possibility that potentially happens.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. Formula One action on Sky Sports F1 this weekend. Please keep up to date with all the latest news from the F1 community as well, with reaction to the French Grand Prix next weekend. Moving on now to Charlie's good news. Now, I said earlier on, Youth Parliament was my feature this week. We're going to talk now about what Youth Parliament is, because Charlie's good news this week focuses on young, aspiring people getting into the world of politics. Now, the Youth Parliament is for 11 to 18-year-olds, which are very, very important. So this is what we've got that I'm going to show you guys right now. Now, the UK Youth Parliament enables young people to use their energy and passion to change the world for the better. UK Youth Parliament provides opportunities for 11 to 18-year-olds to use their elected voice to bring out about the social change through meaningful and representation and campaigning. So that can be, for example, going out in your community, giving out flyers to promote parties, stuff like that. Hustings and stuff, just promoting like candidates out, promoting why you want to be a supporter. And it's very, very interesting that this news is about driving forward more diversity in Parliament. Now, we want to see young people in Parliament because young people are at the essence of politics. So many politicians started out as kids, and the youth parliament is very, very interesting. Now, I think her name is Dame Eleanor Lang. I'm pretty sure I've got the name right here. Now, she actually done a session of youth parliament in House of Commons, where basically people from different sides, like left and right, all went all in together and gave different like speeches about what they could do to improve the UK. So, for example, I'll give you an example of what somebody might say. They might say, could you invest in, say, new facilities at my local gym or something, or improving making more green spaces around, say, parts of Basildon, or maybe making transport more accessible to people with disabilities, for example, or reducing tax on certain goods as well. I mean, some of these policies are very, very interesting that I've suggested. There's probably a lot more that Zach will go over in a minute. But Zach, I just wanted to ask, youth parliament, something very interesting, I think, for young people to get into politics.
Yeah, I've watched this before, actually, Charlie. I've discovered this before. It's very interesting. It's got a lot of young and fantastic voices that are inspired to come out, be in politics, and make a change to their community, I think, Charlie, and their constituency as well. It's a voice basically for our future generation, to have a say in policies and politics. And even if they're not that influential, they do have some influence on what policies are, and it could affect their local council, Charlie, their local area, the whole of government potentially as well. So it's a nice little area where our young generation debate issues that are most important to them and what they feel like they need in their area as well. Now, as you know, it doesn't normally take place in the House of Commons. It takes place somewhere else. I don't know where else it takes, but there is once every year, Charlie, where the youth parliament take over the green benches and go into session there, and it's you get everyone joining there pretty much, Charlie. You say Damien Lang, the deputy speaker joined. I remember John Burko used to chair a session once of the youth parliament, as well. Lindsay Hoyle, I believe, chaired a session once as well. It's good to see how young the House of Commons use an example as an element where debate happens. And this is where potentially, Charlie, some of our young generation could be in the future. It gives them a sense of experience, like they're the ones in charge of the country. Imagine if they were, Charlie, it'd be great. Honestly, I think that our youth generation could do better than the ones that we've got in charge at the moment, to be fair. But it's actually really nice to see lots of wonderful people, Charlie, like them, set example, debate very fairly, I would say, and very courtesy of opinion and views, whether you agree or disagree. It's a nice place for civil debate and just lovely practice overall, Charlie.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where we want people to like get into politics, and I think as well, it's kind of important. You've got like local groups. Like I'm going to use an example of a group called the Castle Point Young Conservatives, where basically you got like these local sort of groups from like these that form basically like from these political parties that run like local groups for like people to become members of, and then they can sort of drive up the investment for their parties. I mean, I'll use a personal example. I mean, I knew someone called Jamie Bomford. I'm going to use his name if you're watching tonight's show. He actually joined the Castle Point Young Conservatives. He's probably at somewhere else now. But he was a part of the Castle Point Young Conservatives, and actually went out and done some like campaigning in local areas to try and promote more people to the party. And also some of these like groups get to go out and actually like basically at one time during the 2019 general election, Boris Johnson actually met these guys. And actually, like, you could ask questions to the Prime Minister on what you could improve on. And it's very interesting to see, like, groups like that, Zach, meeting some of these big world politicians.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a fantastic example, Charlie. And it's critical that we listen to them, because they are the generation that will be brought up and potentially making all the decisions in the future. And we need to listen to them, Charlie. We need to listen to how they engage with us. We need to really engage with them, communicate well, and just, take a lot of inspiration from them, because they are going to be the ones, like I said, that are going to be potentially running government in the future, in the next 30, 40 years' time. And they need to see people set an example of what they should be like and what they want out of them.
It's very, very important. And whilst I'm here, guys, this is a short video I'm going to play of one person in particular who made a speech. This is someone called Victor Sarpong, who made a speech in the UK Youth Parliament. It was a debate speech on, and I quote this now, PSHE motion CHOSA. Have a listen to this.
Is, however, to be concluded by a speaker from London, for whom I hope you'll give an enthusiastic welcome, namely Victor Sarpong. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, London. Come on. An educated man once said, "A child educated only in school is an uneducated child." Why is this? It's simply because our schools do not teach us the sufficient life skills which we all need and use every day in life. Which is unfortunate, but it's fortunate that we as a youth parliament have recognized this. It's on our manifesto, and it is on the Make Your Mark ballot. It was the top issue this year, which nearly 1 million people voted on. And we have just discussed and debated the idea of a curriculum for life as our national campaign. In short, learning about matters that actually matter and not just for the exam. We know that finance matters, taxes matter, knowing how to actually get a job matters, knowing sex education matters, knowing culture in this country matters, and knowing what happens in here, in this very box, matters. The idea is to deal with the matter and challenge the fact that these things aren't being taught in schools, which everyone goes to. But in all things, we have to ask the questions to see whether this would be a successful campaign for us. See, we want to be taught these things in school about life, but I've found personally that life is such a good educator. It's such a good teacher. It's our experiences that nurture us and shape us as the people that we are today. But should it be up to us to learn these things? Or should it be up to the state that expects us to know these things, to teach us these things? We also have to ask the question, who's teaching these life skills? If it's going to work, we need teachers to be educated in how to educate us with these life skills. However, would extra training be a burden for the teacher? And would it be a burden for us, already having so much to deal with in terms of exams and other things? We also have to consider the time that we have. I've noticed a theme this debate. I've noticed a lot of people don't think that we can do things in a year. But I believe that whether you achieve your goal or you make the smallest impact, I believe that we've still achieved something. No matter what we pick, I believe that this applies to this. And I believe things can be done in a year. People revise for their A-level exams in a year. The political climate of the UK and the USA changed a tremendous amount in under a year. So I believe change is possible in a year. It's whether we believe that we can achieve things in a year. It's whether we take the opportunity of the campaign. Because all of the things we're talking about here are important. NHS, voting at 16. All of these things are important. It's whether we should focus on one of these issues or focus on the education that we have. It's up to us. It's up to you guys. But at the end of the day, I know that we can all agree on this. Something is definitely wrong with our education system. The scrutinizing system puts things in us when the word education comes from the Greek word educe, which means to bring out. Education is supposed to bring things out of us. It's supposed to show us our worth. I am more than 2 train tickets. I'm more than that D or that A that I got on exam day. But our education doesn't show us this, and that is for us to challenge. But we have to put this as a campaign if we want to do these things. We have to have this as a campaign if we want to make change in youth parliament. Is that something we can do? Should we recognize that all lives matter in this situation and all life skills should be taught to people? In 1 year, can we make meaningful steps to creating a curriculum that will prepare all young people for life? Thank you.
Thank you there to Victor Sarprong for delivering that speech. Before we move on, Zach, to the papers, what did you make of Victor Sarprong's speech there on education?
I have to say, also well done. I'd clap along as well, Charlie. That was brilliant. I mean, whether you agree or disagree or not, that was a very thoughtful, well-hearted speech, very well prepared, and very well presented, Charlie. It was extremely well presented, and I agree in principle with most of what he said. That was a great speech overall, and we need people like them in Parliament.
Yeah, I think I think for my good news segment, we'll try and focus a little bit more on the youth parliament kind of aspect. I think we need to try and talk about this a bit more because there's a lot of initiatives that people can get up to, and yeah, for me, it's a good thing we need to cover. Youth parliament is actually a big thing right now. Young people getting into politics, very interesting. Moving on now to have a look at the day's papers. Should I say most of these papers are now for tomorrow. Hence why we're going to be looking at them. So, the 23rd of July, the Daily Telegraph goes, Truss tells France to fix holiday travel chaos. This comes as queues of 6 hours were reported at Dover today after a system glitch in France. Paris blamed for 6-hour queues Dover as port chief warns of disruption all summer. Daily Mail goes with the headline, Wish You Weren't Here. Dover queues are chaotic during the holiday season, according to the Daily Mail. The Times goes for Britain facing a national emergency. Leadership hopeful warns of crisis in the economy, NHS and over illegal migration. Fix migrant crisis, please. 15,000 people crossed the channel this year. In the Daily Mirror, it goes for Paddy, we split up. It comes after Paddy McGuinness and Christian Lampard announced their separation. The main headline, though, goes with the holiday chaos at Dover. The Independent goes, great summer getaway brought to a standstill. Daily Express goes, voters back Truss to beat Starmer at the next general election. I'm thinking very unlikely, in my view. The Daily Star goes, classic National Lampoon's headline there. Are we nearly there yet? The iWeekend goes for Truss tax cuts mean interest rates of up to 7% higher, says her economy guru. And finally, Financial Times goes, row over post-Brexit border checks hits biggest holiday getaway. Zach, what do you make to the latest newspapers?
Oh, we got lots of minutes already, Charlie. 9 of them to be precise at 10 o'clock, which is good, which is great news. Let's start with the Telegraph because they've been focusing today on the absolute problems at Dover. For those who haven't been up to date, there's been Dover today declared a critical incident because basically nobody could get their stuff over to the France, Charlie, and it would cause traffic jams like this. 6 hours of traffic, Charlie, at Dover and near France as well. It's been a terrible day for getting stuff over and for people going on holiday as well, I have to say, because people do go on holiday via Dover port routes as well. And that isn't going to do anything better as well. The French have been blamed on this. Liz Truss, one of the Conservative leadership contenders, has already weighed in on this, basically saying that, it's the French fault. They need to come up and fix. Dover actually did blame the French for the lack of staff on their other side, Charlie. Now, we don't know now this is obviously what they are saying. The French are disputing this. But yeah, if you've got problems with your holidays, Charlie, then this is not going to help for. And if you want to get stuff over as well, like items into France or France into Great Britain, a blockade is not going to help as well. The Daily Mail goes to the same thing. Wish you weren't here. I have to say, no, I wish I wasn't, Charlie. I'm glad I wasn't at Dover, to be fair. 7-hour gridlock at Doha. Families hit by travel chaos as summer break begins. Airport choked by hold up, Charlie. Yeah, I imagine as well on the transporting, it's not going to get any better as well, Charlie. The RNT have announced more strikes coming up. They did walk out of a meeting today because their pay offer wasn't efficient enough as well. One big development as well today, Charlie, as well I was going to say, is that the people working at exam boards who grade the GCSEs, A-levels and all that stuff are also going to be doing a walkout as well for 72 hours. It may possibly mean that our exam results, or whoever's getting our exam results, could arrive late. Quite stunning, Charlie, I have to say.
Absolutely ridiculous.
As well. The Times has got an interview with Rishi Sunak, Charlie, this weekend. Britain facing national emergency. He warns of crises coming up in the economy, NHS, and illegal immigration. Well, I just want to say, Charlie, who has been in charge the last 12 years when problems with the economy and the NHS have happened? Let me think. Oh, yes, the Conservative Party. It's not really surprising when they've been in charge that they've had issues, Charlie, as well. It's quite something for Rishi Sunak to say. He talked about economy, illegal immigrants, the National Health Service as well. He announced policies to tackle 5 national crises over the coming weeks as well. So, yeah, he's going to announce more policies the next couple of weeks as well. He said the former chancellor said the government was not working as well it should, and warned that business as usual mentality was no longer enough. And they said families were facing enormous costs from rising inflation, the NHS is under unsustainable pressure, and the public believe the government has lost control of the borders. That, I think, is a dig at Priti Patel, I think, certainly that, Charlie. I think that little as well, I would have to say. That's quite something for him to come out with as well. The Daily Mirror goes for holidays chaos as well. At Dover, France accused over 6-hour delays. Airports around the bridge head for the break. Keep in mind, Charlie, that the schools have broken up today for the 6-week summer holiday. So it's no wonder today is the day that it seems a little bit chaotic. I expect next week is going to be a bit even more chaotic as well, Charlie, when people try to get on the holidays. And potentially as well, it could be that obviously next week they're going to be strikes in the RNT. The post office announced their strike. BT workers are also going on strike next week as well, Charlie.
Jesus Christ.
As well. That will be something. There's going to be a lot of strikes next week. Let me tell you that, Charlie, as well. And also, as you mentioned, Charlie, it's sad news today that Paddy McGuinness has looks like it's split up with his longtime wife, Christine McGuinness. They've separated after 11 years of marriage, which is news that's come out today. They made the decision a while ago. They will still live together with their 3 children in a family home as well. So it sounds like they're okay. It's just that the side of the marriage is not working now. And they're still looking after their kids, and they will still live in the family home together as well, Charlie. So, yeah, that's news of the split as well in the Mirror. The Independent also goes on the over chaos as well. It's the biggest holiday weekend of the year, as you know. They're obviously the government blame woefully inadequate border control staff in the French. They expect the delays to run into early next week, and I mean, goodness me, Charlie, early next week it is going to be chaotic, Charlie, because more people will go on holiday on potentially Sunday and the Monday, Charlie, potentially as well. It's going to be chaos on the roads, I have to say. It'll probably be chaos at the airports as well. I read there was talk somewhere about introducing passenger limits. Potentially, I can't remember, it was standstill somewhere, Charlie, as well, which is utterly horrific if that's the case as well. The Daily Express are campaigning for Liz Truss to be their leader, Charlie. Vote back Truss to beat Starmer. Well, you can press X to doubt on that, I would say. Is this a poll of Daily Express readers? I'm sure they'll like that That's what they think,
I
Charlie.
think Labour will probably raise a glass to that, probably.
Oh, they certainly will. I certainly agree with that, Charlie.
Which isn't a good thing for me, but there you go.
I have to say, Rishi Sunak has more of a chance of beating beating Starmer than Liz Truss ever would. I mean, does the Red Wall need more Thatcherite policies? I thought they hated Thatcher, and if they really think like issues like Thatcher, pandering to Thatcher is really going to win the public over, I don't think they will. They'll find out they're in a total doolally land, Charlie. Let's do the comic headline of the week. The Daily Star is actually tackling the issue of Happy Holidays. Are we nearly there yet? It does feel like an episode of Shrek all over again, Charlie. A donkey is impatient, I have to say. Looks like the donkey is impatient. Forced French blame for 6-hour Dover delays. Slow fuel protests held on motorways as well. That's relating to Just Stop Oil incidents as well, Charlie. But look at that. That is a big old queue, Charlie, at Dover as well. The weekend goes on something else. They talk about Liz Truss. And experts predicting that under Liz Truss's policies, if she implements the tax cuts now, that potentially mortgages interest rates of up to 7%, Charlie. That, interest rates of 7%. I mean, I have to look at the current interest rate at the moment. Let's look at the current interest rate in the UK. So far, I don't know what it's currently 1.25%, Charlie, and under the Liz Truss policies, apparently it could be 7%. Keep that in mind. That could fuel even more inflation. Would you believe it or not? Interest rates will have to go up, and it's a good. He says a normal level more like 5 to 7%. I don't think that would be any bad thing. That's Professor Patrick Minford. I don't know what professor that would is. Home ownership would move out of reach for more first-time buyers, experts said. So, yeah, I have to say, Charlie, that is insane. If her policies are really going to push interest rates up to 7%, that would be unbearable, I have to say, Charlie. That would be something. Oh, and just one more, Charlie. The FT weekend says rather the post-Brexit border checks, Higgs big holiday getaway. There's always the Brexit element in this, Charlie. There's always the Brexit element in this. The Financial Times is focusing on that as well. Not enough French passport police. Calais make the same claims of UK offence. So they're basically both blaming each other. But at the end of the day, Charlie, the real losers are the people going across the Dover ports and people and exports and imports of goods and other essentials, Charlie, that are coming into this country. They are the real losers. So that is the papers for tomorrow, Charlie.
Yeah, tomorrow's papers, the 23rd of July, and of course, more updates next week on the Prime Ministerial debate. Reaction to the BBC debate will be done next weekend. Now, time for the great British stars and Red Devils of the week. I'm going to start off with my nominations. One of the stars this week goes to the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, or the RNLI, for what they done today out at sea. Now, I believe today they rescued an 11-year-old boy who was stranded in the English Channel. There was this boy out here who actually, a schoolboy, a Tommy, 11 years old today, got rescued from safety. Can I just say, well done to the RNLI for rescuing this boy, because he was actually about to drown as well. I have to say, very, very difficult, horrible, literally to see him there. Yeah, certainly very interesting as well. Lauren and I rescued him. He was actually caught after the wind. We picked up at 7 p.m. We decided to go in mysterious Spain. The pair traveled to Ashford to spend time. Mum has spoken of a horror of a son who swept out a mile out to sea on a dinghy. So, yes, thank you to the RNLI for rescuing him. I'm also going to give it another great British star this week to Jeremy Clarkson, former Top Gear presenter and the Grand Tour host, who made a very interesting comment about the weather, the hot weather we had this week. Didn't you know, on Tuesday, it hit 40.3 degrees in Lincolnshire. It was the hottest day on record in the UK. Certainly wildfires were very popular. But Jeremy Clarkson got a nomination this week. As well, it leads celebs accusing weather reporters of, and I quote this now, scaremongering with the weather. Basically claiming, and I quote this now if I can get a quote up. Clarkson tweeted, "It's very hot in the south of France, but so far as I know, there is no DEFCON 8 level 3 killer death heatwave warning in place. I spent my life working in extreme heat. We survived having a beer under a tree. Climate change is real. Drink more beer. Sorry, really hot in France this evening. But I've had a beer as well. I find that very interesting. Kind of like a comedy take on the weather, saying I've had a beer in heat. Certainly, Jezza very much enjoying himself. Maybe Dawson's Farm will get more listeners after that. Zach, what do you make to my latest nominations there?
Interesting. I do like your first one. I have to say, I do like your first one as well. That's a very lovely recognition. I have to say, Charlie, as well. Right. Let's move on actually to my nominations this week. The British Star and the Red Devil, Charlie, and then I'll do an honorary mention at the end as well. The British Star this week goes to all the emergency services this week, and our firefighters as well, because they have had to tackle very horrible blazes near Dagenham, Charlie, and in the London area. On Tuesday, Charlie, a major incident was declared because of these fires, Charlie. Very, very serious and very...
Upminster, one of the places got hit.
Upminster as well, yeah. As well, Raynham as well, and there was the other one. Where was it? Wennington, Charlie, where the worst of the fires was, Charlie. There were some very, very horrible fires there that destroyed some. I think I have to say, Charlie, very horrible fires. The worst of them in Wennington, which destroyed a few people's homes and destroyed most of the green areas as well, Charlie. It was very horrible there. So I want to shout out all the firefighters who've been doing work to protect everyone and get everyone out and try and get everyone out of the houses and stop the fires. We've got to give them tremendous work for all the work they've done in the heat and all the fires at the moment, Charlie. They've done very well, and I have to give them the Great British Star of the Week as well. The Red Devil, Charlie, I'm going to give it to... Overall, I think I'm going to give it to the Conservative Party this week, Charlie, because I think they've ended up with two of the worst possible choices they had the Prime Minister. And it's been very messy as well, Charlie, because they have been writing up line after line after line after line for the Labour Party at future elections, Charlie. I have to say, certainly, in my opinion.
Did you see what Rishi Sunak gave some of his party members, the one in the gifts? That I think GB News was sharing about a gift where he gave... he promised a big gift and he gave someone like a bottle of Coke or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I absolutely. There was a joke going around, and I think it was he said he took Coke or something like that, and he meant that as in not the Coke is in the drug, and but the Coke is in the drink. It was a bit awkward in front of two school kids as well, Charlie. We were all very awkward, I have to say, in the moment as well. I'm going to give an honorary mention this week, Charlie. I'm going to give the honorary mention to the England women's football team who have made it through to the semi-finals of the Women's Euros as well. They won 2-1 in extra time against Spain. Very hard-fought match, very tough. Probably one of the toughest yet for the team. But they did brilliantly, Charlie. They did absolutely brilliantly, and I'm going to give an honorary mention to them because they did a great job. Hopefully, they'll win next week. Their semi-final next week, Charlie, because if they do, they go into the final on I think it's Sunday the 30th of August. That's what they will go in.
Is at Wembley, by the way, guys. The final of that Women's Euros.
Sunday at Wembley. So hopefully they get through there. But honorary mention this week to the England women's because they've done a brilliant job overall. Yeah,
it'll be a Euros update next week on that. I'm going to give my Red Devils out. One of the obviously the obvious choice this week. Just Paul get a nomination for the Red Devil for a horrendous week of protests, including storming News UK this week. What an illogical way to break into News UK where Talk TV are. Stupid, vile. And then the protest on the M25 the other day, ridiculous. Another nomination. Well, I actually have a bonus nomination that I have decided to add to my list of my Red Devils this week. Well, the Red Devil I'm going to give it to is the BBC for their allegations of Martin Bashir's interview with, I think, Princess Diana in the 1990s. There's been a whole scandal on that, and the BBC have been in big trouble. Zach, what did you make to that interview with Martin Bashir?
Yeah, that was obviously a very serious thing around. The BBC have paid compensation to, I can't remember who it was, but they paid compensation and they've apologised as well. And they think their investigation did not uphold the highest of standards, Charlie. Very serious stuff in the BBC as well. That needs to be improved in the future, Charlie, when they're getting raw interviews. Hopefully they've learned their lesson in that time, but as well. But yeah, very serious. And there's a lot of victims this week, and thoughts out to them.
And I'm also going to give a bonus nomination to Matt Hancock on LBC the other day for being ripped apart by a listener on his time as health secretary. I must admit, all the LBC presenters as well, certainly covering in for James O'Brien, probably arrive on my nomination list as well, whatever that comes into. But thank you so much for watching, guys. And that's it for the Charlie Tolhurst show this week. Be back again next week for more on the latest news. Take care, everyone, and good night.